Worldwide Technologies has laid out 5 network priorities for 2024, and one dominant theme surprising absolutely nobody: artificial intelligence. Right off the top, Priority 1 acknowledges the enhanced visibility AI brings to network operations. You see, predictive analytics and automated responses are not just buzzwords, but gateways to new, higher expectations for efficiency and insights. It's ripe terrain that I'm eager to explore further, but it's not just about AI. The evolution of secure service edge platforms appears to be settling in to a good value-added groove, offering any fence sitters more reasons to finally pull the trigger. Mixing my metaphors, but consider your vendors carefully. The forecast for OEM relationships is a bit choppy, with M&A activity stirring up new complexity, clouding visibility into what the future holds, and thus how you should be responding. Now, the last priority here includes the rise of network as a service and the pioneering realm of quantum key distribution, both hinting at a future where connectivity is seamless, secure, and innovative. Yet amidst this AI-heavy narrative, Priority 2, facilities integration, stands out not as an outlier, but as a vital piece of the puzzle. It actually reminds us just how far AI is driving change everywhere. For facilities and operations, AI offers compelling solutions to deeply rooted challenges with modernization, especially against the backdrop of an aging workforce using tools from a bygone era. Change is not easy. In our collective excitement, we do risk replicating past mistakes where isolating efforts led to fragmented solutions offering only temporary solace. So instead of AI, we are going to center this discussion on connectivity. Seamless integration within facilities and operations hinges on wireless connectivity, a field that is fraught with rapid change and perpetual misunderstanding. And this is where Sam Clements comes in. Joining us from Spring Hill, Tennessee, Sam is a wireless expert that I have turned to for years. From the promise of Wi-Fi 7 to the critical roles of BLE and Zigbee, we're going to explore how wireless is reshaping connectivity for our campus networks. Network platforms that support our hybrid work models, enhance security, and embrace the unpredictability of an AI-driven future. My name is Rob Boyd. Welcome to Worldwide Technology Presents Research, with insights powered by the Advanced Technology Center. Well, Sam, this is kind of an interesting moment for me having you on the research series, and we'll talk about the topic in just a moment. But let's focus on you for just a moment. I've just had you in my back pocket, if I could say that, there's a wireless expert that I've gone to numerous times when I've been confounded with going into depth on various things, and so it's very much an honor to have you on the show here to lend that credibility. So first of all, welcome, Sam. So glad to have you.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. It's great to talk to you again, and always love the conversation.
Well, for anyone that may not be familiar with you, you're relatively new to Worldwide Technology. You're still doing wireless at Worldwide. Do you mind explaining what you're doing and kind of what led to you joining Worldwide?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been with Worldwide here now for coming on about 5 months or so. I was at my previous employer for 15 years and have been in the wireless and networking space for quite a long time. Here at WWT, I'm a technical solutions architect and on the global solutions architecting team.
Okay.
And so I act as sort of a point of escalation for solutions architecting for the broader field. You know, if we have folks out in the field who are looking for expanded use cases, or they've got a particular challenge with a solution from a vendor, that's when they bring in our team as a point of escalation. And so I sit on the global team driving technical solutions for WWT.
Okay. Is that considered a pre-sales function? So you're involved with
it is
a lot of that kind of stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. And then, of course, when you make those relationships, I know we all get drawn into post-sale because that's
absolutely
what those relationships do, and that's fine.
You bet. And that's sort of the importance of being able to still lay fingers on keyboards, right?
Yeah.
You still have to stay practical.
The show is about the priorities report around networking for 2024. We'll probably do several videos around this because there's a couple of different deep topics. But we were chartered with speaking to priority number 2, which talks about the integration of kind of the network, and oddly specifically in my mind when I first saw it, which was this notion of integration with building facilities and facility and operations, which I think has been a topic off and on for many years, but for reasons that we'll talk about now, it's starting to become a little bit more relevant.
Of a priority.
Yeah. It made it into a priority. Let's just use the words that we asked. Before we talk about facilities specifically, a lot of the integration was around the technologies when you talk about network as a platform. And if we think about our network as being something that enables others to facilitate what they need, which can be beyond the IT department in and of itself. But wireless comes up a lot in this. Historically, wireless equals Wi-Fi. Yes?
Right.
No? Does it? Is that the ongoing thought? Can we start from there and talk about the different technologies that are valuable for this type of integration conversation, and what are some things we need to be aware of?
Yeah, sure. So, yeah, and you're right. The sort of the building management systems integration seems oddly specific for making a networking priorities report. But the reality is that there's so much behind that topic. You're right, which is, integration with other systems, and is that Wi-Fi, is that other connection mediums that happen to provide transport without using a wire. And it's a D all of the above, of course. So when we talk about wireless networking, of course, the 99% of people start with Wi-Fi because that's what they know and love. And it's what's the most pervasive. We have something like 42 billion Wi-Fi devices in the world. Nobody hasn't heard of Wi-Fi. And so when we talk wireless networking, that tends to be where people's heads go first. And that's when we start talking about, Wi-Fi 5, Wi-Fi 6, Wi-Fi 7, and those generations. And it's very, very equitable to the conversations we would have with, my mom about, hey, do you have a 3G phone or a 4G phone or a 5G phone, right? There's these sort of terms that we all bandy about because they're wonderful marketing terms without a lot of understanding what goes behind them for consumerization purposes.
Well,
when we start, go ahead. Yeah.
Well, I was just going to stop you there just to break it down just a little bit. Stick on Wi-Fi 7. That one is in this area that we've talked a little bit about, where I feel like Wi-Fi is constantly improving. I naturally think bigger numbers are better than smaller numbers. So
Bigger
7
is
must be better than 6, must be better than 5. I know that there's obviously a lot more minutia in there, but why is that maybe a bad way to think about it? And what's important to understand about Wi-Fi 7? Are we still in a wait and see how the promises lend out? Or is there anything big that we really should be waiting on with Wi-Fi 7? Or I don't know, where do you think things stand?
When we rewind the clock back and we talk about the standards that have been built, look, the industry hasn't done us any favors, especially with Attitude 11N and draft standards and waves and, amendments of letters, Wi-Fi 6 versus Wi-Fi 6E. And you almost have to be a specialist in the industry in order to understand them all.
Yeah.
And when we talk Wi-Fi 7 in particular, right, so some of the most compelling benefits out of Wi-Fi 7 are really all about speeds and feeds. And if this doesn't sound familiar to you, then you've not been in the Wi-Fi industry for long, or a networking industry for long. But Wi-Fi 7 really brings with it the promises of greater speed and more deterministic access, right? Yeah. Ooh. And so we're talking about APs now with it that can provide platforms of 36 gigs of throughput plus. And it's like, I feel like we've almost jumped the shark here on the Wi-Fi side of the house, because at some point you have to go, okay, if I've got a 1,000 square foot cell, can I really genuinely consume 36 gigs of throughput in that physical space? And the answer is rarely yes. And so Wi-Fi 7 being relevant to this conversation about building management systems is very, very much not a direct, clean, clear fit. Building management systems, what are we talking about? We're talking about connecting things. We're talking about IoT. We're talking about sensors. We're talking about occupancy. What aren't we talking about? We're not talking about bandwidth. We're not talking about speeds and feeds. We're not talking about AR, VR. We're not talking about any of those, telemedicine use cases. We're talking about something that's fairly pedestrian. And frankly, Wi-Fi 7 isn't really the topic of conversation there. We don't need our sensors to talk faster.
Yeah.
We need them to speak more specifically from a protocol perspective and not get in the way of what it is we're trying to do with our day-to-day Wi-Fi 7 activities. So that's everything from, hey, do I have an AP with BLE in it? Do I have something that's Zigbee connected? Do I have something that's ultra wideband? Do I have something that's infrared? All of those technologies are all wireless technologies, and none of them have anything to do with Wi-Fi or Wi-Fi 7 or frankly speeds and feeds.
Well, how important is it? You mentioned that sometimes we can have Wi-Fi radios that have these additional, additional radios built into the enclosure to support Zigbee or BLE, which I'll have you explain in just a moment just to make sure we're up to speed with everybody. Right. But that's not the only way in which they're deployed. They don't have to come as part of Wi-Fi.
Right.
I think that's just a vendor strategy for kind of blanketing the market, I would guess, right? Do you mind explaining those technologies and how, I don't know, where we tend to come across them?
Yeah, absolutely. And in fact, Wi-Fi 7 is so new that there's only essentially one vendor that's shipping an AP, and it's based on, pre-standard spec, and they promise everything is going to be fully ratifiable. And it's the same shenanigans that we go through
It's a
time and
cycle.
again, right? Yeah, you bet. And so how these APs are productized is ultimately what you're talking about here. Hey, if I'm going to talk about having a conversation with my building management or my facilities management folks, speeds and feeds aren't going to cut it for them, right? They literally don't care about you delivering 36 gigs of throughput to an end user. What they care about is, hey, do I have a way of doing occupancy sensing? Is there something in that AP that will give me more than speeds and feeds? Is there a way that I can connect to my HVAC sensor? Is there a way that I can see what the temperature is inside of a room? Is there a way that I can see what the air quality conditions are? And those sort of use cases that really have nothing to do with the speeds and feeds of Wi-Fi and have everything to do with connecting wirelessly and driving value from a Wi-Fi platform. Because those Wi-Fi platforms you're right, those are the platforms that come with those extra radios. And the choice is, as always, do I buy another new network in order to overlay onto my building in order to get my connectivity to my sensors and whatever, and consume more Ethernet ports and do more design and have two independent separate systems? Or do I do Wi-Fi with an overlay of my extra sensors that I'm going to need for my connectivity? So it's very, very debatable which one is right. But, in my world, it's about convergence of the platforms.
Well, okay, speaking of that, just from definition perspective, for anyone, BLE, Bluetooth Low Energy.
Bluetooth Low Energy. Yeah, you got it.
Zigbee, I don't think it stands for anything, correct?
Zigbee is the marketing name behind the Zigbee organization. There is a Zigbee protocol that is a marketed and branded protocol that is, I believe, based on 802.15.4.
Yeah.
So really, at the end of the day, that's the radio that we're talking about. And I realize it's a lot of letters and numbers, but in the Wi-Fi world, we would say, hey, my Wi-Fi 7 is based on 802.11bz. My Wi-Fi 6 is based on 802.11ax. Well, my Zigbee is based on 802.15.4, or based on a Bluetooth or on a 15.4 variant. And so these are protocols that ride on top of other radios.
What makes those specific protocols good or bad for certain applications? Why would we want to use those versus something else?
Yeah, so there are way more wireless protocols than just Wi-Fi in the world, and they all address different things. Some of them are optimized for range. Some of them are optimized for reliability and redundancy. Some of them are optimized for throughput. Some of them are optimized for, and there's sort of this ball of benefits that you get, and each protocol sort of drives one way and sort of robs one from another way. And so it's very, very common to go and say, hey, my use case is sensors in a 50-acre field. Well, you're not going to deploy ultra wideband to go do something like that. You're going to deploy something very, very low frequency, something very, very long range, something very low bandwidth. That's different than what we would see inside of a facilities management use case, where you've got pervasive sensors all over the place. You don't need a really, really, really big cell to grab all your sensors. And you're probably going to need a little bit of bandwidth, right? You're not talking about, some of these technologies are miles and miles worth of range, but they're kilobits worth of data. Right? They're tiny, tiny infinitesimal amounts of data. And so we need more than that. And we don't quite need that big range. And so it's about finding the right technology with the right type of clients that meets our spacing, our bandwidth, our reliability concerns for these sort of sensor networks.
And depending on the deployment, these things could be having to run off batteries or be in such a situation that could be more dynamic or temperature prone or something else that gets taken into consideration. And so cost effectively, you wouldn't want to put an expensive battery draining, heavy duty radio out in some place that doesn't meet those requirements.
Doesn't meet those requirements, right?
So one of the reasons why I think facilities starts to become much more important these days versus maybe in our conversations in the past is that I think, and we discovered this, so let's just go ahead and call it out. You and I do research before we talk. And we were saying, well, we don't really deal with facilities on a day-to-day basis. Let's go talk to some people. Let's read what are they consuming? What are they being told? And what do you know? AI is running over that industry
all
too.
Over.
And as we would expect, right? There's not a single industry that's untouched by this advent of generative AI and LLMs and everything that have suddenly brought 20-year-old AI into much more into the front node of the head. But on this, I think also we're looking at post-COVID, where if anybody feels a little bit unsure about what they're going to be doing next and what they're supposed to be doing. I think it's buildings and facilities people who have these massive, beautiful physical landmarks that a lot of people are saying, I'm not going into that every day, or we're not going to do that here, or not going to do it at all, or somewhere in between. And everybody's like, are mandates the right way or not? I'm not here to talk about the politics and all the stuff that goes into that, because I think it's an exciting time and technology is the enabler to these things, but it does change expectations, I think, for facilities. And at the very least, they need flexibility. And I feel like a lot of the integration we're talking about here is saying, don't do what we've seen a lot of people do in the past, which is take on, this vendor said that I could completely integrate these sensors into my building management system and roll it up to this other system to do reporting, but it's all a unique silo separate from the networking department. Right. And suddenly we've got parallel paths. What are the dangers and benefits, that you see with bringing these things together, and how much of a priority do you think it really is?
Yeah, well, I mean, probably the easiest question to answer is how much of a priority is it? And I think it's probably a pretty significant one. And it's more than I think just sort of the post-COVID occupancy world or the post-COVID, social distancing world. We also have, LEEDs compliance for buildings. We also have Energy Star compliance. We also have initiatives around energy savings that really have nothing to do with sort of the post-pandemic world of occupancy. It's just regular old, hey, how do we continue to stay green, and how do we continue to drive that conversation and tangibly demonstrate that we have savings? And so those two things, I think, combine together to make a meaningful target for us. And I think you sort of glossed over it there at the beginning, but as we were looking at this problem from a facilities management perspective, they do something very similar, right? They publish reports about what their industry is looking for.
What are their priorities?
Yeah, exactly. And I think for the first time I saw, the networking priority report, and then from the other industry looking at us or telling the world what their priorities were, that everything from AI to network connectivity to converged systems, they're really looking at making sure that they can take advantage of the technology behind these problems as well. So it's a convergence of, I think, multiple forces at play. And then you asked sort of what the risk is. Your competitors are doing this. Your competitors are using this as a competitive edge. They are either going, hey, we've optimized our facilities to the best that we can. And, oh, by the way, we realize we have a ton of wasted space. We're going to go through some cost savings optimization so that we can stay healthy as a business. There's a variety of responses to that, but making decisions based on actual measurable, intelligible, tangible data is what we're after here. And whether that action or whether that business decision is close a facility, open a facility, rearrange a facility, create more space for a facility, whatever, if you're not using real data to make these decisions, then you're guessing.
Yeah.
And facilities guesses are expensive. They're really, really expensive. Yeah. And when they get them wrong, right, they hurt very bad.
Let's talk about some of the specifics that are being offered in terms of what's really called for in this priority report. They speak of, and it's funny because to me anyway, because I guess I've worked on a lot of topics around location-based services. I feel like those have come up as they've come up like video conferencing had always come up. And then video conferencing just suddenly became
for the
a
last
thing.
2 decades.
And then we realized, oh wait, I guess we are past that already. And it just sneaks up on you sometimes. But location, is often, you're talking about more than a 2D space. You're talking about potentially 3D space. You're talking about the combination of other factors beyond location, such as temperature, barometric pressure, I don't know, whatever you need, air quality. When we do these kind of things, AI is based on data. These things are going to, the more data we can give it, the better decisions we theoretically can make, assuming that we can harness it. That requires a network that, hiding nothing here.
Provides
Party
the transport
one,
options
AI/ML-based network.
Yeah.
Network that can handle it. When it comes to location and stuff, are we getting better at being able to isolate location in a way that is consistent enough to where business decisions are being made, to where office availability and utilization can be used, that type of thing?
Yeah, so there's really two points to that, I think. One is that as these Wi-Fi standards continue to evolve, one of the ways we get speeds and feeds is by decreasing the number of clients per AP, right? It's a pretty straightforward, hey, if you've got one AP serving 100 clients versus one AP serving 10 clients, which one's going to perform better? So we've always been driving after this increase in density from an infrastructure perspective for years and years and years. More APs equals greater visibility and greater fidelity into our location. And so there's sort of a byproduct of the industry cramming more speeds and feeds down our throat, which increases density, which increases fidelity from a visibility perspective. And so that's sort of thing number one. And the thing number two, as we live these use cases, we find out how many of them are legitimate and reasonable and actually executable. And as these become more and more of a reality, success breeds more success.
Yeah.
And so some of it is, hey, we finally been talking about doing location for years, but okay, is really tracking my phone as it walks down the hallway actually useful for me? No. But tracking a whole bunch of things in batches is, right? We're looking at these use cases where we all thought, hey, maybe I'm going to be able to track the wheelchair or the nurse or the whatever. And it turns out like there are some corner cases for that, but that's not really where the meat's at. Where the meat's at is when you can track things and then clump them together and then look at the byproduct of large groups of people doing things. And so it's a sort of an extension of the location services use case, whereas it used to be an individual thing. Now we get very, very rich data from a variety of places and people and things.
I wonder if you can go further in that, because what jumps to mind is, and I know this is a different thing completely, but it's micro versus macro economics.
Yeah, yes.
Where you see, the individual thing is fine, but don't miss the aggregate data can give you big picture understanding to do things differently and more profitably, perhaps.
Bingo. Yeah.
Okay. So I feel like as these things become more mainstream, because technology is making them easier to do. You're not talking about something that has to be constantly tweaked as much anymore. I think we're getting beyond stuff like, help me out on this one, RSSI being kind of the measurement for triangulation and things.
Yeah.
By avoiding Wi-Fi 7 potentially, or Wi-Fi period, for doing some of those things, but working in conjunction with it. It really feels like as it becomes more mainstream, you made a point to me about facilities really needs to be thought of as a line of business. So in other words, on par with other lines of business. What do you mean by that? And can you break that out a little bit?
Sure. When we look at engaging or positioning a solution, invariably we're talking to somebody in IT, right? And we've sold through IT. Hopefully, fingers crossed. Before right? Yeah. And so, the world has been around, going to IT and positioning a solution and then deploying a solution and running the solution and operating the solution. And that's all great and fine and wonderful. But we've also, we've heard of shadow IT before, right? We've heard of lines of business that, hey, IT, I'm not getting what I need through IT. So I'm going to go and I'm going to spin up an AWS instance, or I'm going to go buy a bespoke solution and pay a monthly bill on my credit card. And our sales motions have sort of matured so that we can go address these things. Hey, we want to address your shadow IT concerns. We want to bring you into the part of the IT picture so that you're not out doing your own thing, being your own individual line of business, justifying a new IT spend for a technology outside of the broader IT scope. And we've done that for years, right? We've gone to the manufacturing line and said, hey, you're putting out tires. Let's have a technology specific conversation about you rolling a tire out the door. That's engaging line of business, but we haven't really looked at those internal resources as being compelling enough to drive technology. And that's where I say facilities management really should be considered a line of business. Yeah, they're not producing something. They're not giving you a thing to go sell to a customer. But boy, are they really, really important when it comes to that. They are almost of paramount importance, because if you don't have a place to go do a thing, then you're not doing a thing. And most organizations are manufacturing something, whether it's a tangible good or a service, right? Commercial organizations are here to give something to somebody. And if you don't have a location for that, the teams that take care of those locations really need to be brought into some of these conversations, just like you might go engage somebody on the manufacturing line and say, hey, how do we increase quality control on a tire? We need to be going to our line of businesses, our internal line of businesses, if you will, and saying, hey, we have an internal spend. You're a cost center. Let's make sure that the money you're spending is optimized. Or if you need more money, let's make sure we attach an IT budget to it so that we can then turn around and represent savings to you later. Or we can take this data and turn it into a compliance report for you. All of these all of these facilities management folks have goals just like we do.
Yeah.
In the technology world, right? We want to close more tickets. We want to increase customer satisfaction. We want to adopt technology in new and exciting ways. Facilities management folks have the same type of concerns. We want to reduce costs. We want to make sure that our facilities are optimized. We want to make sure that we have the solutions in place that our users need.
Yeah.
Those folks have budget, they have technology, they have demand.
Which I like when you say they have budget, because I think some things you overlook is you go, hey, IT,
well, there's that too.
You don't have a lot of budget. Now, I guarantee they don't have a lot of budget, and that's just going to become something magical. But looking at how you can team and say, could we help you stretch your budget? Because the other thing that jumped out at you and I was the fact that, and funny how this mirrors what's going on in IT, is resources for labor are going down. They've got an aging issue in building and facilities management because of a lot of the best people might be old school facilities people that have been doing it for a long time. It's valuable knowledge. They get older. Now, a new generation comes in. They're simultaneously hit with new technologies. Management's looking at the technology as being an answer to the, how efficient can we be with this? Can we do more with less resources? And the network is the obvious place to do that, if not for that reason, but also for the fact that, especially when you go into wireless technologies, you have to know everything that's going on in your facility from an IT perspective, or you're going to have unexpected dropouts. You're going to have troubleshooting that goes nowhere. It just feels like a big wasted effort that spends more money probably than it saves. Is that accurate?
Well, yeah, and it actually goes even beyond that, because if you look at the way we've been consuming IT over the past, call it 5 years or so, there has been this marked change to as a service type of offerings, whether that be recurring revenue offerings or whether that be, cloud-based offerings. And those organizations where you may have made a decision 5 years ago to go to a Meraki or some other sort of cloud-based something or another, right? And you've been paying that recurring bill over and over again, but you haven't been keeping up on what that organization or what that vendor has been doing for you. You may realize that you've been paying for solutions that you can just go out and consume without actually spending any more money. You may be paying this sort of recurring revenue for feature velocity and increased, application support. And you
Fully
may have bought off on that 5 years ago. Yeah, you bet. And then suddenly you logged into a dashboard, you got your network up and running, and AI took over, and you've never had to worry about it at all. And you didn't go back in and look, and so you don't see this. Oh, by the way, I can now do analytics. Oh, by the way, I can now do blah. Right? You haven't seen these innovations. And so sometimes just going back and getting just getting a pulse check on your alignment with your vendors. Hey, I haven't talked to you in 5 years.
Yeah.
By the way, I've got this facilities management, folks. Is there anything that I'm already paying for that I can just drop a report and show some benefit?
I'm so glad.
Is there something I can bring to the table, right?
And I'm so glad you brought that up, because you're reminding me, one frustration I had when early sales days, and this is back, Cisco had the integrated services router. And within it,
I know where you're going
the
to.
sales field is charged with, hey, yes, it's a router. Oh, but look what else it can do. And it may have the wireless radio. It may have, so many other features and functions for security. And that was kind of the big one, which makes a lot of sense, right? You get the iOS-based security or whatever. But the challenge is that you sell it, the customer is doing a big router deployment. Their primary focus is routing. But these other services that may have helped you win the deal, may have helped you stand out from the competition or whatever, may not be adding any value to the customer, even though they paid for it. And that was always just a big conundrum, because I was like, how do you do this? The modern example specific to today's conversation is, I know I've gone through a conundrum working with Cisco WebEx. Let's use that as an example. And I'm not promoting any vendors here, but the idea is WebEx now for Cisco has all the telepresence devices and the stuff from their Tandberg acquisition and things. So very good hardware for doing video. First conundrum, I'm like, I've got computers with most of the time has a pretty good camera built into it. It's amazing how late some of those are. But it's not hard to do it on the computer. It's like, why do we need dedicated hardware devices? But then you say, okay, well, they put these devices a lot of times in shared spaces and rooms to kind of increase the audiovisual capabilities and remote conferencing. And a user just has to come in and everything's done for them. It's automatic and things. But what a lot of people don't realize is, in these same situations, and I bet there's examples in other manufacturers and industries, is they have sensors built in that may be going unutilized, and they've got API access that can be used to talk to your building management team, roll up to their management platform. Doesn't mean the networking team has to start understanding that to any level of depth, but you might be in charge of endpoints that could be providing more data about air quality, about temperature, about people counting. I just think that your point is right on. Your relationship with your OEM partners is highly important. Did I restate another good reason for you on that or no?
Absolutely, and I think that we'll just continue to unpack that for a second. We as technology professionals, we like to talk to technologists, and as we talk to technologists, we have these CCNP certification, CCIE certification, right? We know that we have a language that we can talk. But I think that something that people don't realize is that in the facilities management place, they do the same thing, right? Well, you don't have to be a building energy assessment professional, right? In order to be able to do these things, you're not expected to be the facilities management professional.
Yeah.
You're expected to be able to go identify who that professional is and have a conversation with them, so that because they're looking for the same thing, right? They're looking at us going, hey, how do I know that they're the person who's setting up my printer is different than the person who's configuring my Wi-Fi? Which one's actually going to be able to help me, right? Well, they're going to go, okay, gosh, I'm going to look for certifications. I'm going to look for wireless centric things, or I'm going to look for whatever. We need to do the same thing.
Yeah.
And so we need to make sure that as we're engaging with facilities management folks, that we understand what their professional organization or their world looks like. And then we need to try and insert into that, right? And hopefully help them out. That's ideally the goal.
Yeah. And that to me gets right full circle back to network as a platform. It's something we've heard for a long time, but is because I think of a platform as an enabler, and it provides a solid foundation upon which many others can build and scale, because they're not going to get the scale. They're not going to get the build. And, you start doing these things, there's no room for doing things in your silos any longer. Not the pace and the rate in which things are moving and changing. And it doesn't have to be. But as we kind of bring things to a close, you've been at Worldwide Technology for 5 months, so I don't want to put you on the spot with saying, what all resources can you specifically speak to and cite with examples around how Worldwide Technology can help? You may be familiar with some of those, but I invite you to open up and just say, what's the right way for someone out there who sees the value in doing this, wants to start checking more deeply into it? What kind of things would you recommend that they do first in terms of data gathering, research, communication, anything?
So, obviously WWT has the Network Priorities Report for 2024. That's what we're here to talk about. And that's clearly the starting point, I would say. Right on the platform. Yep. You can check.
Got that one.
And so, I think starting there is important, but obviously engaging your WWT account manager. Yes. All of those fun, wonderful things. But I think as we start looking and casting about for, okay, what do we do next? We obviously want to make sure that, as mentioned, the Network Priority Report, our vendor relationships are up to snuff, because by virtue of the fact that you're listening to us, we hope that we've got a good relationship, and we hope that we are we're walking down this road together. And so, yes, you plus WWT sitting down, plus your vendors or plus your building facilities folks, and talking through some of these possibilities, I think is next.
Yeah.
Understanding who can do what, and understanding what the lay of the land is at your organization, because WWT, we do technology, right? We do that really, really well. What do you bring to the table? You bring an intimate understanding of your business. And so that's how we plug our two things together.
What outcome do you want to achieve, and how can we help you get there?
You bet.
And it does take, it's interesting here because it takes multiple experts. It's going to be multiple disciplines that come together to be able to do these kind of things. But this is where it starts. It starts with people not being afraid to say, hey, how can you help me with X? Well, I know we've got links to the report at the bottom of the page, as well as potentially some other resources. And Sam, it's always fun to keep up with you and try to absorb as much as I can from you. But thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely my pleasure. Thank you for having me on, and looking forward to the next time we chat.
Last year's Network Priorities Report zeroed in on 3 pillars: agility, security, and scalability. Now, these pillars are just as crucial in 2024, even with AI demanding attention from every sector of the business world. AI is pushy, and it's such an incredibly promising double-edged sword. See, AI demands a careful response, regardless of any wait and see you might be trying to get away with right now, because it's a balancing act, injecting innovation, but without disrupting flow. So we're not just adding new gears, we're making sure that they turn in harmony with the old ones. WWT's networking priorities for 2024 will require multiple deep dive sessions just like this, as all 5 items have much more depth than may appear at first glance. My name is Rob Boyd. Thank you for watching.